Hi guys, welcome to another episode of Clangin and Bangin with Mikey, episode 217. And as you guys know, March is always Cerebral Palsy Awareness Month. And I do spend the entirety of the month talking about CP and everything too. This year we're going to do a little differently though. What we're going to do is we're going to talk about how CP affects me. Because I can go off and I can get the research like I've done in years past, and I can literally tell you guys the difference of, what CP is and how it affects, kids. And ironically, an interesting stat is that CP affects boys more than affects girls. And ironically, there's more African American boys who have cerebral palsy than not. So I always thought that was interesting, stat, because it makes me think like, damn, man, like, other than complications at birth or whatever it is, or premature births, what causes African American males to be born with CP? And it probably has a lot to do with your SES standing, and it probably also has to do with a lot of damn, it's hot. Yeah, yeah. Also has to do with a lot of back in the day during the civil rights movement, and prior to that, they had a bunch of all black towns. And so the most popular ones was in Tulsa. There was all black towns in Florida. When I say all black towns, they had their own schools, their own doctors, their own police, their own police department, their own newspaper, everything, right? And they were essentially what the Jewish people are to their community, right? How the Jewish dollar like circulates something like 70 times or whatever it is before it leaves the community. It was the same thing with these historical black towns. And like I said, there's towns all over the country that were once, affluent all black towns. There's a town in Virginia that literally the people got run in the town, and when in Virginia is where they built the Pentagon, and literally you can look up the Pentagon and you can look up where that actual town is. Black Wall Street in former Tulsa. You know what I mean? It's like, then you have that I can't remember that town of Georgia, but where they ran out the black residents, and then they burnt the town to the ground, and they killed and raped and murdered everybody. And then they submerged the town underwater, and now there's a lake. And every single year that people go to that lake, people end up dying. So I mean, I'm not a spiritual guy by any means, but you know what I mean? Yeah. I think the name of the lake is called Lake Lanier or whatever it's called, right? Anyway, I would always think about that, like, and I'm like, okay, what's the correlation between young black boys who are prematurely born and who are having bouts of CP, and there's different ranges of CP too. And so with that, let's dive into it. Anyway, man, so cerebral palsy is actually considered a traumatic brain injury because it actually affects your fine motor skills, your hand movement, your feet, how you walk, and your speech. Me personally, it's more along the lines of my walking per se, because I have what they call a scissors walk, and my speech is can get slurred from time to time, right? Usually happens when I'm getting fucking super excited. But for the most part, yeah. a lot of speech therapy and a lot of um, communication classes. And funny because at one particular time I was gonna be a communication major, but I ended up falling in love with psychology, and that was that. And I do think that it's imperative that people understand that no, it's not a disease. No, it's not something that you can catch having sex or whatever it is. And yes, talking about sex, um, everything down there works. Yeah. That's all I gotta say about that. Everything down there works, and exponentially well. So, but the bad thing about cerebral palsy is that once you have that disability, whatever the severity is, it doesn't go away. Um, and I often think about my brother, because he had a severe version of cerebral palsy. You know, to the point where he couldn't walk unassisted. He couldn't do everything else that I can do, and I never once heard the guy complain. You know, I never once heard him say, "Man, I wish I could do this or do that." You know, I think my mother only heard him complain once. They was going somewhere, and this is like maybe like a week or two before he died. And bro was like, and the kid was riding his bike up and down the neighborhood, just, doing normal kid things. And my brother was like, "Man, I wish I could do that." And my mom was like, "What?" She's like, "Yeah, I wish I could ride a bike." And I never once heard him complain other than that, you know? Like, that was one guy who just, he loved life to the fullest, and I miss him every day. He was a reminder to everybody around him, and anybody can attest to what it is. It's like he lived every day like it was his last, man. I never seen him talk bad about people. I never seen him talk shit about people. I've never seen him talk down to people. I've never seen him be mean to people. I mean, he would roast you and everything, but like that was all in good fun, you know. Like he wouldn't be deliberately mean to you just for the fuck of it, you know. And I just think about that, man. Like, cause we both have cerebral palsy, but his is obviously a lot more evident than mine. You know, only time people would see this cerebral palsy is when I would get up and walk. You know, and it's just amazing to me that you can have somebody who like that, who had every right to be mean, disrespectful, call people out their names, do X, Y, and Z, but he never did that. You know, he just never did that. But anyway, getting back to that, man. Like I said, cerebral palsy is classified as a TBI, a traumatic brain injury, because of that. And they don't really know what causes it, right? Because it can happen during birth, right before birth or right after birth. I'm just assuming it has to do with a lack of oxygen or something to the brain, because it's traumatic. Because anytime you cut off oxygen to the brain, it doesn't matter how short of a duration it is, there's most likely going to be some sort of effect that happens. And most times the effect is negative. And it also made me think about, like, damn, like I said before, African American babies that are born, particularly males. And it got me thinking. Most people who have babies, either they don't have access to, most people who have babies who have medical issues like cerebral palsy or any type of, disability, right? They don't have access to adequate health care. They don't have access to adequate food. They live in environments that aren't productive for pregnancy. They have a high stress life, whatever it is. And I'm not saying that black folks is the only people that go through this shit, because there's a plethora of different people who go through this shit, right? Um, the quality of food is not that good. There's food deserts most likely. Most people who, you know, and if you're struggling to pay your bills, it's most likely you're not gonna have the money for a car. And if you don't have the money for the car, it means most likely, you know, you're using public transportation to get to your groceries and then some, right? And it just made me think, and it made me think about this class that I took. It was psychology, like 455 or 405, whatever it was, but it was health psychology. And it talked about the difference of how not having access to adequate health care, food, everything plays a role. And I took that with conjunction with a developmental psychology class. And so when I took those two classes, it kind of correlated with each other, and it made sense, you know, because if you're struggling to get food on the table, quality food, if you don't have adequate, you know, transportation to get to and from, most likely you're working a minimum wage job, which most likely means you don't have benefits to take off medical leave and do everything else. And if that's the case, you're most likely not going to your appointment. So you're missing critical information. And even when you do go to your appointments, it's something along the lines of you don't have the best access to the best medical care, you know. And a lot of the times people will use the ER as their doctor room because they don't have adequate, you know, health care. And so it just made me think, because it's like, you know, what can we do to you know, to stem this? And I ran across this video. Bless his brother's heart. I think he's an angel on earth. I can't remember the guy's name, but he's a doctor in Baltimore, Maryland. And if anybody's been to Baltimore, Maryland, it's one of the most crime-ridden, downtrodden, economically poverty-stricken cities in the world. And this brother has been doing medicine for like 40 years. And he does not charge his clients anything. They can come in like with their babies and get medical checks, everything, right? And only reason I ran across this video because I was on social media scrolling, and I told myself I was gonna look up this guy's name, and I'm probably most likely gonna donate some money to him, you know, because what this brother does is amazing. He doesn't charge his clients anything. Like I said, nothing. Like, they have access to him 24/7. You know, like they have his personal cell phone number. He's been doing medicine for 40 years. 40 years he's been doing medicine. Doesn't charge anybody a dime, bro. And here's the kicker. When he got cancer, the same community that he serves, bro, they donated $100,000. Imagine that. The same community that he doesn't charge to have to get adequate health care. When he got cancer, I think he said it was two types of cancer. It was renal and rectal. Yeah. And this community pulled together and raised the money to help him pay for his treatments. They covered everything. And that's the one thing I love about us, man. It's like black people, man. It's like we so goddamn resilient. You know? It doesn't matter what, you know, where we come from or what it is or what walks of life that we come from. And like, it touches my heart because my father was from West Baltimore, man. It's like, and like I said, I've been back there a couple of times. I need to go back there just to, as an adult, to take this shit in, because it's like, last time I was there, I was 15, and that was over 20 years ago. And you don't really take in, the opportunities that you have. Because at 15, I'm like, okay, what the fuck? I didn't really think nothing of it. Now at 36, I'm like, yo, okay, like, bro, you own a house in Hawaii. You do X, Y, and Z. Like, you got a nice whip sitting in the driveway. You got a decent career. Look at where your parents came from. And it just all goes back to basically understanding how fortunate you gotta be. And to tie all this back into cerebral palsy, I think it's imperative that we get more black folks and to have adequate health care. And a lot of it has to stem from the fact that as you can go back to prior as far as the 1800s, where these white doctors would experiment on on black people. Yeah, go look up Henrietta James. She was they literally harvest her body to for all kinds of different diseases. They would take black children and do experiments on them. A lot of this shit was not ethical. It's like, and a lot of these medical schools are still around. A lot of these medical schools that were doing that were in the deep south. And so you couple that with, the generational trauma and everything else that we as black folks have endured, you kind of growing to understand, okay, I can see why you mistrust doctors. Because you have a history, or your family has a history of, like, let's just somebody goes in for a random checkup. A lot of the time, these babies would not come back. Or what they would do, they would take wards of the state, and they would do the experiments on them. Again, all white doctors. So at the end of the day, it's extremely imperative that we understand there's a lot more things to it than what we just, assumed it would be. I'm not saying that every black folk is like that. I'm not saying that all black people mistrust doctors. But I do tell you one thing, bro. When we see one of us in a white coat, we immediately relax. That's anybody. That's me. That's any black person. When we see one of us in a white coat, we're like, hey, what up, dog? How you doing, doc? We immediately relax because we know, number one, that we're not going to get bullshitted. We know, number one, that we don't have to put up with no disrespect. We don't have to do all that shit. And so it's imperative that we have, not just black folks have, not to be scared to get medical attention, but we also have to have the same representation that we see every day. Too many times brothers be like, oh, only way to get out the hood is rap and play ball. Nah, bro. Before 2008, I did not believe I would see I would assume a black person would be president in my lifetime, but not in my 20s. I would assume that somewhere down it, in my lifetime, that there would be a black person or a black male or black woman in general, or just a minority woman in general, being president. I often think about my dad and all the shit that he went through, because he grew up during segregation and civil rights and the whole nine, and it's like, even though our relationship was contentious at the point, I made it a point to always ask him questions. I know I'm going off topic here, but I asked him, because he was in his 20s when he's in his 20s when Malcolm X got killed, and then Martin Luther King got killed. And I asked him, like, I remember I was in high school. I was sitting at the dinner table. And I asked him, Pop, I got a question for you, man. He said, "Hey, what's up, son?" I was like, okay. We was talking about Martin Luther King and Malcolm X today in history class. And I didn't really trust what she was telling me, right? Because honestly, the history teacher that I had, I hate to sound racist, but she was a white woman that just basically checked out the boxes for Black History Month. That's what it was. And I remember she did a presentation on Tupac, and like it was just kind of glossed over. I'm like, I approached her after class. I'm like, Miss, you're a history professor, right? And she's like, yeah. Shouldn't you have done more research on why Black history is held in the month of February? I'm not saying that Tupac isn't a great example, but there's more examples than just a rapper who got gunned down. So right then and there, that kind of just told me that she just wasn't invested in this shit, right? And why would she be? You know, this is Hawaii. You know, not too many of us Black people running around. Anyway, so I remember asking my dad, like, "Hey man, how'd you feel when Malcolm X and Martin Luther King got shot?" And mind you, we're all eating dinner, so it's me, my brother, my dad, and my mom sitting at the table, and everybody just stops. Dad looking at me like, "Okay, all right." I was like, "Yeah, how'd you feel?" And he's like, "Man, well, to be honest with you, son," he's like, "I was mad, you know, because you got people fighting for change and people fighting for equality, and it wasn't until 1964 that it took the federal government to make a law that, you know, Black people, not just Black people, but minority people could get served in restaurants." And then my dad was telling me, like, yeah, you know, like when he was growing up, they could never sit in the restaurant. They would have to go to the back of the restaurant to get their food. Like there were certain doctors that they couldn't see because, you know, of what they call redlining, you know, and everything too. So it was like there's so many different things that impact the health of a person. Not just the person, but the generational thing too. And I'm pretty sure there's still old Black folk out there who be like, "Nah, I ain't going to the doctor. I ain't doing X, Y, and Z." And you can't blame them for that. How can you blame them for that? You know? And I understand how this may seem long-winded and how this may not make sense, but when you really go back and listen to the entire tape and you do some research, you can kind of see the correlation as to why African American males are more prone to cerebral palsy disability, simply based off that. I'm not saying because of X, Y, and Z that there's a correlation, but when you think about it, it makes sense. Because if you have adequate access to healthcare, quality food, nutritious food at that, if you making all your appointments on time, if you have a stable income, if you have reliable transportation, then yeah. So at the end of the day, that's what it is. And I think a lot of people, they gloss that over and not realizing how impactful that is. And how impactful, you know, that can be. You know, everybody talks about pulling yourself up by the bootstraps and this and this. Yes, and everybody should. I'm not saying you should sit there and fucking be weak and be saying, "Well, it's me, this and this and that." Because, you know, at the end of the day, everybody goes through something. I don't care who you are. I don't care how much money you make. My favorite rapper, JDK, said, "Pain is one thing that is universal." It doesn't matter how rich you are, doesn't matter how poor you are, pain is one thing that's universal. And it's up to us to basically understand that we have to be the voices for ourselves. And if we got pissed some people off, that's cool too. You know? I'm not gonna lose any sleep over a motherfucker that don't like me, X, Y, and Z. But what you ain't gonna do is sit there and pretend like my needs don't matter. And like I said, I will look up this brother's name in Baltimore, Maryland, who gets free medical attention, because that's what we need, bro. I'm not saying that we need free medical attention. I'm saying that we have to have people in the medical field that look like us, who treat us with dignity and respect. Because a lot of these disabilities or birth defects can be prevented with proactive health care. Most of these birth defects and disabilities that happen at birth or during birth can be prevented. You know? So, and that's just something that I think about, and something that I felt that was necessary to talk about, simply because of this. And because cerebral palsy does affect me. It is a traumatic brain injury. And like I said, everything works. Believe me, everything works. But at the same time, you can't ignore the systematic racism that plays into it as well. Look at the stats. Numbers don't lie. People lie every day, but numbers don't lie. And once you connect the dots and you feel like, oh, damn, this actually does make sense. Damn, really? Wow. You know? So at the end of the day, that's what it is, man. It's like, be open-minded to everything, but question everything as well. Don't take everybody's word for it. Don't take everybody's, oh, well, X, Y, and Z, boom, 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 boom. Yeah, because like I said, people will hoodwink you and be like, well, what makes you think what makes you think that wasn't true? And that's just something I think about, and something that because it breaks my heart for a kid not to be included in sports or not to be included in certain things because he or she has cerebral palsy. It breaks my heart to realize that there are people out there who don't view them as human beings or fully functional human beings. And on the last note before I wrap this up, my brother, man, I love you, I miss you. He had this keen ability to play dumb. But yeah, that motherfucker was probably he was the smartest cat in the room. Like, he would sit there and get all this information and be like, he would come to me and tell me, like, bro, this motherfucker think I'm stupid. I'm like, bro, I know, but keep playing those cards, bro, because it's like, and he ended up showing up people off anyway. I was like, he would always brag to me like, well, his GPA was higher than mine. I'm like, yeah, dog, okay. He's like, that means I'm smarter than you. I mean, so it's like, it's just things like that, man. It's just, people are people. Anyway, this is 29 minutes of your life that y'all won't get back. Hope y'all keeping it at the 4 P's. Private, player, positive, pushing. I'll see y'all next week. Love y'all. And like I always say, know your worth because you're better than what you are. Peace. All right, y'all. Have a good Sunday. Later.